On March 19th, 2020, a builder was discovered dead by the homeowner who had engaged him to build a casing around a recently installed range hood. Craig Johnson, aged 53, was lying on the floor with both his hands clenched and one shoe missing. The newly installed range hood was partially hanging off the wall. The cause of death was found to be heart failure caused by an electric shock. His right thumb had a burn mark indicating an electrical entry point. The electrician who installed the range hood was recently charged and sentenced. Although the incident happened in 2020, COVID restrictions and lockdown caused severe delays in the court proceedings. The electrician was charged and found guilty under Section 162C of the Electricity Act 1992 for failing to adequately test. He was sentenced to 8 months home detention in order to pay $150,000 in restitution to the victim's family. He's in the process of selling his boat to come up with the funds. So how did this happen? How could it have been prevented? And what can we learn from it? My name is Alex Gallagher. I'm an electrician in Auckland, and in this video, I will be reading from a script I wrote. This is one of my first videos ever produced using a teleprompter. So if I sound a bit robotic, please forgive me. I put a bit of time to this script, and I've got some feedback from it from some respected electrical educators and inspectors. So the information in here has been vetted and is informative. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Swiss cheese model of safety science. The basic idea is that accidents are not caused by independent events, but by a series of safety failures which together enable an accident to happen. Each safety safeguard is like a slice of Swiss cheese with holes in it that, without other safeguards, would allow accidents to happen. When multiple layers of Swiss cheese are combined, the holes in one level are covered by the other layers and accidents are prevented. But when two or more of these layers fail, meaning the hole in one layer lines up with the hole in another layer, then a tragedy can occur. When these safety systems are working properly, then one failure is not enough to cause harm. The entire New Zealand safety regime is based on the idea that two faults must be present in order to have an unsafe condition. So in this particular fatality, there were two faults. There was open circuit protective earth, meaning no earth protection present at the socket outlet. Had there been one, then the second fault would have created a short circuit condition and the circuit protection would have tripped. And the second fault was that the earth connection on the outlet was live at 230 volts. And this is what resulted in the fatality. Had the electrician done the required testing, he would have noticed this and rectified it so that these faults would have been removed. We're going to go into that in detail shortly. So as electricians, we all make mistakes sometimes. Testing our work is essential for catching these mistakes and fixing them. Not only that, but testing can detect all sorts of other faults that may have been present in the installation, just waiting to cause harm. So there's been several cases where an electrician was just on site to do some other job, but they did their test, and when they did the test, they discovered there was a really high resistance in the circuit somewhere. There's one case I saw posted not long ago in a Facebook group. The electrician did the test and then did some digging and went and found a hot connection in the mains cable in the ceiling. Now, if that had been left, there's a few things that could have gone wrong. So just routine testing done well on site can actually discover other faults present in an installation that were unrelated to the work that was done. But the main thing they do is they pick up any mistakes you may have made in your work or any faults that may affect the work you did. So a loop impedance test is the test you're supposed to do when you do electrical work like extending a circuit, altering a circuit. Then you're supposed to do a loop impedance test. This makes sure that the circuit protection is going to operate in the required times and that there's no hot or loose connections anywhere in the circuit. But even the most basic testing, such as probing the outlet with a multimeter or one of those really basic plug-in halogen testers, would have picked up this fault. One of those plug-in halogen testers, it would have taken not even a minute to pull it out of a tool bag and plug it in, or if you have to go out to the van, 5 or 10 minutes, depending how far the van was. So it's not a big ask for us to do this basic kind of testing. The electric shock happened because the green wire supplying the range hood was connected to 230 volts, meaning the entire frame of the range hood was live at 230 volts at the time of the incident. A few decades ago, it was legal and fairly common to use a green conductor as a switch wire. This means instead of being the safety conductor that's relied on to protect metal frames from becoming live, it is a source of the live voltage it would otherwise protect against. Think of it like swapping your brake pedal for another accelerator pedal. I don't know if that analogy means much to you, but as electricians, we see green, we think earth. Similarly, when the location where your brake pedal is, you instinctively hit that to stop. But if that's going to make you accelerate, a lot of accidents would happen. But as electricians, we have a duty to test rather than assume. This is not a driving accident where you knee-jerk react and put your foot on the pedal. You do some work, and then you make sure that the work you've done is safe before livening it, and then there's more tests you do after livening. So as electricians, when we see a green wire, it's easy to assume that it's what it appears to be, that it's an earth, but assumptions are not acceptable when lives are at stake. So the device that was being replaced had a fan and a light, and it was double insulated, so it didn't need an earth. There was a switch on the wall, or two switches on the wall, one for the light and one for the fan. And one of these switches was using the green conductor as a switch wire. So it was a red, a black, and a green. The black's the neutral, the return, and the green wire was supplying voltage down one of these wires to turn either the fan or the light on. From the reports I heard, it sounds like the electrician pulled the old unit off the wall and cut the cable that was running into it. This prevented him from being able to see the setup, so although it's not required to take the thing apart and check out the condition, the current setup, if he had done that, he would have figured out what was going on and this incident would have been averted. But there's nothing wrong with just cutting the wire and carrying on, provided you've ensured that the wire is safe before cutting into it, that the power is de-energized. He then fitted the cable into a standard 10 amp outlet, installed the Rangehood, and presumably carried out some functional testing. I say functional because although the electrician claims that he did electrical testing, the courts found him guilty of not testing. And I would say the reason they did that is because there's no test that this would have passed. Either you would have tested and found 230 volts present on the earth conductor, on the earth pin on the socket outlet, or you would have tested and found open circuit on the earth. Either way, it would have failed any test that could have been done. And when he did his functional testing, it must be that the switch that would have made the Rangehood live was off. Otherwise, he would have got a shock. So, and yeah, also the homeowner was unharmed. So it must be the case that the homeowner was either turning it on and off at the wall and not touching the Rangehood, or anytime they touched the Rangehood, the switch that would have made the frame live must have happened to have been off. Whatever the case, when the builder went to do his work, the tragic event happened because the Rangehood was live at 230 volts. So as electricians, this is a stark reminder to us of just how dangerous electricity is and how important it is to test our work. Now, I want to go through the Swiss cheese model of safety and look at all the layers which combined to allow this tragedy to occur. The first one is testing after doing prescribed electrical work. This is the critical one. This is where the buck stops, and this is why the electrician was found guilty and sentenced for basically a kind of criminal negligence of failing to perform his duties required of him by the Electricity Safety Act. Because of his failure to test, the electrician left site with two faults still present: no earth protecting the 3-pin socket outlet that the Rangehood was plugged into, and phase 230 volts present on the earth pin. Frankly, I'm amazed it took 2 weeks for the serious harm to occur, and the property owner is probably suffering survivor guilt of some kind. I know I would be. Yeah, so mistakes happen, faults happen, old installations can be dangerous, but testing cuts through all this. In the UK, they go further than this and do periodic testing to ensure existing installations are safe. I think we should bring something like this into effect here. I think periodic testing is great, and I think I've watched some electrician YouTubers in the UK and they go around and find things that are on earth that need to be earthed all the time. And obviously installation in all the buildings can start to fail, and I think it's a good idea to go and test that and pick it up before buildings burn down. So carrying on with the Swiss cheese layers, the second layer I want to draw attention to is the use of green wires as switching wires. I've always been concerned by how older installations will have green wires carrying 230 volts, but this recent fatality has made it so I will never look at green wires being used as switching wires the same way. New Zealand electrical regulations are not retrospective, so though it's been illegal since 2010, there are still many installations that have it. And provided it was illegal at the time of installation, it is allowed to remain in its original condition. That's also providing that it's still safe. If the installation's failing or some other failures are occurring, then it does need to be upgraded. And when you upgrade it, you bring it in line with modern safety specifications. I think that the use of green wires for switch wires for carrying voltage should have never been allowed. I think it's incredibly dangerous. Now, you could say that they were doing the best with what they had at the time. And yeah, sure, fair enough. I mean, no one had invented apparently a 3-core cable is what we call it now, a strap cable, which is it's got a yellow sheath so that we can identify it easily, and it's got a red, white, and a blue conductor. We often use the blue for a neutral and the red and the white for phase conductors. You can also use all 3 for phase conductors and just run one down to a switch. But I think necessity is the mother of invention, and necessity is in part how we see things as unsafe and the urgency with which we look at things. So if it was understood just how dangerous it is to be using green wires like that, I think someone would have pretty quickly invented a 3-core cable, and we never would have needed to use, or at least not for as long as it went on, green wires as switching wires. Now, I've had a discussion about this with electricians in a Facebook group, and they were defending how back in the day they used green wires for switching wires, saying it was fine, we just did our testing and that made things safe. Now, it is true that if all the electricians do their job properly, then the use of green wires for switching wires does not create a problem. But we're talking about layers of safety, and any one of these layers can fail. So it's always possible that there's an electrician out there who doesn't do their job properly, or isn't trained properly, or is inattentive at some time. And the whole point of having multiple layers of safety is to have many safeguards that make it so if in the odd time an electrician doesn't do their job properly, it doesn't result in a fatality. Obviously, you can't prevent against every case of someone not doing their job properly. But I think green wires, like I go back to my having a brake pedal, and it's another brake pedal instead of an accelerator. It's something like that. It's just obviously not a great idea, and the evidence for that is the fact that it's been illegal for over 20 years to do that. So yeah, in this case, a combination of a live green conductor and a failure to test resulted in a fatality. If either of those 2 factors were not present, there's one person who would still be alive today. Another safety measure that could have prevented this incident is an RCD. RCD is short for residual current device. It's basically electrocution protection. They're required to be installed in all new work, but retrofitting them is optional. There are situations where you are required to retrofit an RCD, and that's basically when you've done some kind of new work. There's details about when and when it is not required, which are found in ASNZS 3000. How they work is they measure the current flowing and ensure that it's balanced between the 2-phase and neutral conductors, or in a 3-phase one that it's balanced between the 4 or 3 conductors that are supposed to be carrying current. If they detect an imbalance, they shut off the power supply. An imbalance could be caused by faults such as an ant's nest in the wrong place or water in a light fitting, but it also happens when current is flowing through a person. In this case, if an RCD was fitted, the builder would have got a nasty belt in the milliseconds it took for the device to operate, but the device would have prevented enough current from flowing to cause heart problems. It's still possible that the shock could have caused him to fall off his ladder, and that is dangerous too, but chances are an RCD would have prevented death and serious injury. Falling off a ladder is bad, but it usually doesn't stop your heart, and the height that you're at when you're working in a Rangehood isn't that high, and probably he wouldn't have fallen off his ladder I've got shocks that didn't trip RCDs before, and those are quite nasty. So I don't know how strong a shock would be to trip an RCD. I've never had one, but I'd talked to other people who have had them, and yeah, they were nasty, but I don't know anyone who's fallen over from one. So the rules requiring RCDs are, there's various types of new work or alterations that trigger legislation requiring RCD protection. It is a common misunderstanding among Sparkies that the work done for this Rangehood installation did not meet those requirements. There are various reasons why this misunderstanding persists, which we're not going to go into. Perhaps we can discuss that in the comment section. I will link to a document that quotes the relevant legislation and shows how an RCD was in fact required in this case. Also, it's worth pointing out that an RCD socket outlet, those ones that's the socket outlet with the buttons on it, rather than an RCD back in the switchboard or another one on the wall somewhere else, one of those would not have protected against this fault. The reason for that is that RCD socket outlet does not offer protection against a live earth terminal on the outlet. The RCD would have needed to be fitted upstream from where the earth is connected to the phase so that it could interrupt the feed to the earth wire. But if the earth wire is live already before you run it through the RCD can't do anything to help. So the RCD would not have tripped, and even if it tripped, the voltage would not have been isolated. But testing would have picked this up because you would notice that there's voltage in the wrong place. I guess your RCD trip testing wouldn't work because they'd need an earth there in order to run some current through the earth to simulate fault current. And the last safety layer I'll mention is that he could have opened up the old unit, studied the wiring setup, and investigated the switches to see what they all did. This was not necessary. It's not required of him to do this, but it's good practice to understand the existing wiring setup before disabling it and carrying out alterations. And in this case, it would have prevented this incident. So all the stuff I've been mentioning is mostly all stuff electricians can do to prevent events like this happening. But what can homeowners do? Now, hiring a competent tradesman can be a daunting task, but there are ways to make sure you get someone who does a good job. Google reviews are a good way. If you want to find someone who has a good track record, you can also go on social media, post in a group, or read someone else's post and look for people who are being recommended. Someone responding to your post saying they'll do the work for you is not the same as someone being recommended by multiple members of the group. One time I got scammed by someone who I posted in a community group and someone put themselves forward. He was super keen. I went with the job and he turned out to be a scammer. So I always now look for the people who are being recommended, not the people who are jumping on your post and offering to do the work. Another thing is accepting the cheapest quote can cause problems too. Sometimes someone is cheaper because they charge fair prices, work efficiently, and are offering the right value for you without unwanted extras. But sometimes they're cheaper because they use cheap parts, cheap labor, rush the job, and don't test. But there's only two things as a customer that you need to do to ensure you get a competent electrician and they do their job properly. And those are to ensure they are licensed. You can do this by asking to see their license. Now, their license could have expired or could have been suspended, so you can go on the EWRB website and look up electrical workers, type in the license number, type in their name, and check to ensure that their license is currently active. I've had maybe like 5 customers ever ask to see my license, and they're always very apologetic when they do so. I'm like, no, you should be doing this. Go ahead. Like, yeah, here's my license. It's a good idea, but yeah, no one really does it. And the second thing that you can do to make sure they're competent and do their job properly is look at the COC, the Certificate of Compliance or Electrical Safety Certificate, and read the test results. Of course, they could make that up, but forging test results is highly illegal. So let's hope nobody's writing fraudulent test results in their documents. And the final point I want to make is that I think this electrician is actually very unlucky. I think most Sparkies at some point in the career fail to test in a way that could cause a similar incident. Maybe most electricians don't want to admit it, but I think this is the truth. All it takes is terminating the red wire into the wrong terminal and a heater plugged in there. It becomes a death trap. Outlets are installed and replaced all the time, and they don't all get tested for polarity. They should, but they don't. There's another category of electricians that don't fully understand how to use their tester or what the tests mean. So I think this incident is a wake-up call for the industry and for us as individuals to always test and to increase education on this. Every van should have a multifunction tester capable of testing RCDs, insulation resistance, and earth loop impedance. And everyone should be fully versed in how their testers work and what these tests are actually testing and what is achieved by doing these tests and recording the results. So that's all for this video. If you like this sort of stuff, be sure to subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments. It's a pretty serious video, quite a tragic incident. I'm Alex Gallagher, an electrician in Auckland. I run a small business called Legacy Electrical, and I try to make YouTube videos in my free time. Also want to thank Marius and Marius Schmidt for giving me feedback on my script for this video and for the slides. I want to thank the New Zealand Electrical Inspectors Association. Mark Harris, who gave me lots of feedback on this video, did a presentation for NZ Electrical Inspectors Association, and some of those slides you will have seen as B-roll or graphics during my video essay. So I'll catch you in the next one.